What happens when a battle-hardened alien warrior, trained only to fight and destroy, meets a simple human who dares to teach her something she has never known? Love, this is not just a story of war and survival, it is a journey of the heart where two completely different worlds collide. But the real question is, can a creature built for battle ever learn to love herself? It was a quiet night on Earth. The stars shined like silver dust scattered across the dark sky. People in the small town were asleep, their homes glowing faintly with warm lights. But above the peaceful land, something unusual was happening. A bright streak of fire tore through the atmosphere, moving faster than any plane or rocket. The sound was deafening, like thunder breaking the heavens. The ground shook as the fiery object crashed into the forest outside town. At first, no one dared to get close. The air smelled of burning metal, and smoke rose high into the night sky. Some thought it was just a meteor. Others whispered about secret government experiments, but the truth was far more shocking. Inside the smoking crater stood a tall figure, an alien warrior. Her armor was dark as obsidian, shining faintly under the moonlight. Her eyes glowed like blue flames, sharp and unkind. She carried weapons no human had ever seen, forged in battles beyond the stars. She had not come in peace. Her people had trained her since birth to be a soldier, a destroyer, a tool of war. Her name was Zaira, a commander feared across galaxies. To her, Earth was nothing more than another mission. She believed humans were weak, fragile, and unworthy of respect. Yet she had orders to watch them closely before deciding their fate. In the town nearby lived a young man named Daniel. He was not a soldier, not a scientist, not even a leader. He was an ordinary human with a quiet heart. He loved books, music, and long walks under the stars. Daniel often felt out of place in the busy world. People called him a dreamer, someone who looked for meaning in things others ignored. On the night Zara arrived, Daniel was awake, staring at the sky like he always did. When he saw the fire fall, curiosity pulled him toward the forest. The moment he stepped into the crater, his breath caught. Standing before him was the alien warrior, her blade glowing with deadly energy. She looked at him as if he were nothing. To Zara, he was just another fragile creature who could never understand her strength. Yet Daniel did not run. Instead, he stared back with calm eyes, filled not with fear, but with wonder. This was the moment two worlds collided, one of steel and war, the other of heart and hope. Zaira was ready to fight, to destroy if she must. But Daniel did something unexpected. He spoke. His words were simple, yet powerful. He looked lost. For the first time in her life, the alien warrior hesitated. The alien warrior's glowing eyes narrowed. No one had ever spoken to her that way. On her homeworld, fear was the only language people knew when they saw her. Soldiers saluted. Enemies trembled. Even her own commanders treated her more like a weapon than a living being. But this human, this fragile creature with no armor, no weapons, stood calmly and said she looked lost. Zaira raised her blade. Its sharp edge shimmered with deadly light. One swing, and the human would be gone. Yet Daniel did not move. He didn't even step back. His heart pounded, but his eyes stayed steady, as if he wasn't afraid to face her. In that moment, his courage was louder than any weapon. "Why don't you run?" Zaira's voice was harsh, like stone grinding against metal. Daniel swallowed but held his ground. "Because you don't look like someone who came here just to kill. You look like someone searching for something." His words confused her. Searching. She had never searched for anything in her life. She was trained to obey orders, not to question them. But Daniel's voice had a strange warmth she had never heard before. Zaira took a step closer. The ground beneath her heavy boots cracked. "You think you know me, human? I was made for war. I am the blade of my people. I have no weakness." Daniel's lips curved into the smallest smile. Even blades break when they are used too much. Maybe what you need isn't another battle. Maybe it's a reason to stop fighting. Her chest tightened, though she did not understand why. No one had ever spoken to her about stopping, about resting. On her world, mercy was shameful, and love was weakness. To care for herself was forbidden. Her body belonged to the army. Her soul belonged to the endless war. Yet here was a human, standing unarmed in front of her blade, daring to tell her that she deserved more. The silence between them grew heavy. The night air carried the smell of burned earth and pine trees. For a long moment, the two simply stared at one another, an alien bred for destruction, and a human brave enough to face her without fear. Finally, Zara lowered her weapon. Not because she trusted him, but because something inside her felt unsettled. She did not want to admit it, but this human's courage had shaken her. "A foolish creature," she muttered. "You think your words can change me? I have slain warriors stronger than you. If I wished, I could end your life with a breath." Daniel nodded slowly. "Maybe, but you didn't." Her glowing eyes flickered, and she turned away. She didn't have an answer for him.
Boss.
For the first time, Zaya felt uncertain, not about her mission, but about herself. And though she did not know it yet, this was the beginning of something far greater than war. The forest was quiet, except for the crackling of burning leaves near the crater. Zaira stood tall, her armor glinting in the faint moonlight. She kept her blade at her side, but her thoughts were louder than the silence around them. Why had she hesitated? Why had she spared this fragile human when she had destroyed so many stronger enemies without a second thought? Daniel, on the other hand, didn't see a monster. He saw a lonely soul wrapped in steel and shadow. He didn't run away, even though his body begged him to. His instincts told him to leave, but his heart told him to stay. Something about this alien warrior felt broken, like a bird with wings that never learned how to fly. He stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "You don't have to fight me," he said gently. "I'm not your enemy." Zaira turned sharply, her eyes glowing brighter. "Everyone is my enemy. That is the way of my people. To trust is to die." Daniel frowned. "That sounds lonely." The word pierced her like a blade. Lonely. She had never allowed herself to think about it, but it was true. Since childhood, she had been raised in training camps. Her meals were eaten in silence. Her victories were celebrated not with warmth, but with more orders and harsher missions. Companionship was weakness. Friendship was betrayal. Love, that word didn't even exist in her language. And yet this human saw through her armor with just a few words. He dared to call her lonely. Daniel sat down on a fallen log nearby, folding his hands together. "I don't know why you're here, or what you want from Earth, but I do know one thing: you're more than just a weapon, as I can see it in your eyes." Zaira's chest tightened again. She hated this feeling. It made her armor feel heavy, her blade feel useless. She had never been looked at this way before. Not with fear, not with worship, but with simple, human kindness. Why do you care?" she demanded. Her voice cracked slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Your kind should fear me." Daniel tilted his head. "Because sometimes the ones who look the strongest are the ones who need kindness the most." She froze. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. Her warrior's mask began to crack, even if just for a second. A silence settled between them, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was a bond unspoken, fragile, but real. The stars overhead glimmered like tiny eyes watching them. Zaira felt, for the first time in her life, something strange and unsettling, the warmth of connection. She didn't know it yet, but this was the seed of a bond that would change her forever. And Daniel. He had no idea that by choosing not to run, he had stepped into a destiny far greater than anything he had ever imagined. Zaira stood in silence, her blade lowered, her breathing steady but tense. Daniel's words echoed in her mind, tearing at the walls she had built around herself. She had been trained to ignore emotions, to bury them deep where they could never control her. But now, one human's kindness was pulling those feelings to the surface, like cracks spreading across stone. For the first time in her life, Zaira spoke not as a soldier, but as someone who carried scars no one could see. "You think you understand me, human, but you don't know what I have lived through." Daniel leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "Then tell me." Her eyes flashed, both in warning and in pain. Sharing her past was forbidden, but something inside her wanted him to know. "I was born in the war chambers," she began slowly. "On my world, children are not raised by parents. They are forged. From the moment I could walk, I was taught to fight. While other species play or dream, we learn the art of killing. I was not given a name of my own. I was given a title, Zaira, the shadow blade. Her voice was hard, but beneath it was a trembling she could not hide. We were never shown kindness. If we cried, we were punished. If we failed, we were beaten. The only time we were praised was when we won battles. But even then, victory was not ours. It belonged to the commanders who used us like tools. I have led armies, I have destroyed worlds, and yet I have never once felt like I was alive. Daniel listened carefully, his heart heavy. He had imagined warriors as fearless and proud, but what he heard now was different. Zaira wasn't proud of her victories. She was trapped by them. She had been molded into a weapon, but never given the chance to be a person. That's not living, Daniel said quietly. That's surviving. And surviving without love isn't life at all. The word love struck her like lightning. It was foreign, alien, even dangerous. In her culture, love was a weakness that softened the sharpness of a blade. And yet as Daniel spoke it, the word carried a warmth she didn't understand, but desperately wanted to. Zaira turned away, her voice low. Do not speak of such things. My kind does not love. We fight, we conquer, we win, or we die. That is the only truth. Daniel shook his head. Maybe that was your truth before. But here on Earth, you have a chance to find another one. You don't have to be what they made you. His words sank deep into her heart. She wanted to deny them, to laugh at his weakness, but she couldn't. Because for the first time, she wondered if he was right. The warrior's past was carved in blood and fire. But maybe, just maybe, her future didn't have to be. The night grew colder, and the smoke from the crater began to fade. Daniel stayed seated on the fallen log, his eyes never leaving Zaira. She stood like a statue, tall and strong, but her mind was far from steady. His words stirred something inside her that she had no training for or something she had never been prepared to face. Daniel finally broke the silence. You know, Zaira, life isn't only about battles. There are other things too, small things that matter more than wars. Her eyes narrowed. Small things. To her, nothing small had ever mattered. Victory, power, and strength were the only values she knew. Daniel nodded and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small object and held it up. It was a tiny flower, plucked from the grass near the crater. Its white petals glowed faintly under the moonlight. This, he said softly, is life too. Fragile, yes, but beautiful. It grows without weapons, without orders, without fear, just because it can. Zaira tilted her head, staring at the flower with curiosity. In her world, flowers were rare, crushed beneath war machines and endless battles. She had seen forests burn, oceans poisoned, skies blackened with smoke, but never had she stopped to look at something so gentle. Daniel stood and walked closer. Carefully, he extended the flower toward her. For a moment, she didn't move. Her armored hand twitched, unsure whether to accept or strike it away. A warrior taking a flower? It felt ridiculous, even shameful. But something inside whispered, take it. Slowly she reached out. Her fingers brushed against the soft petals, and for the first time in her life, she felt something that wasn't made of steel or fire. The flower trembled in her hand, alive yet delicate. Why give me this? She asked, her voice quiet. Daniel smiled. Because kindness doesn't need a reason. Sometimes, it's enough just to remind someone that they deserve it. Her chest ached at his words. Deserve, that word felt even stranger than love. She had always been told she earned everything through pain and violence, never that she deserved anything simply because she existed. Holding the flower, Zaira felt a warmth creep into her heart. She didn't understand it, but she didn't want to let it go either. Daniel noticed her silence and added, That's the first lesson of kindness. Zaira, it doesn't make you weaker. It makes you remember that you're alive. For a moment, the alien warrior forgot her mission, her orders, and her role as the Shadow Blade. She was just Zaira, a being holding a flower under the stars, standing beside a human who refused to fear her. And though she would never admit it out loud, a tiny part of her didn't want the moment to end. The night stretched long, but neither Daniel nor Zaira moved far from the crater. The flower still rested in her hand, its fragile beauty a strange contrast against her armored fingers. For the first time, she didn't feel like a commander, a weapon, or a soldier. She felt unsure. And yet, in that uncertainty, there was something new: curiosity. Daniel noticed her silence, but did not push her. He knew trust wasn't something that came easily, especially for someone like her. Instead, he tried to make her feel less like a warrior and more like a guest. He opened his small backpack and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "Hungry?" he asked with a smile. Zaira raised an eyebrow, her glowing eyes narrowing. "You offer food to your enemy?" Daniel chuckled softly. "I don't see you as my enemy. And besides, food can be the first step to trust." He unwrapped the cloth to reveal bread, still warm from earlier in the evening. The smell was simple, but comforting. Zaira stared at it, her stomach tightening. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she had eaten anything that wasn't tea, a cold ration block from her ship. Her people treated meals as fuel, never as comfort. Cautiously, she accepted the bread. Her fingers gripped it too tightly at first, as if she expected it to vanish. Daniel laughed lightly. "Easy, it won't bite you." She shot him a sharp look, but for the first time, there was no anger behind it. Slowly, she brought the bread to her mouth and took a bite. Her eyes widened. The taste was soft, warm, and unlike anything she had known. It wasn't just food, it carried care, effort, and the memory of home. "What is this?" she asked, chewing carefully as if she were tasting a secret. "Just bread," Daniel said simply. "But my mom always told me food shared with someone else tastes better. Maybe because it makes you feel less alone." The word alone hit her again, striking deep. She glanced down at the half-eaten bread in her hands. She had never shared a meal with anyone. On her world, soldiers ate in silence, in isolation, with no bond between them. Yet here she was, standing in a forest on Earth, eating bread offered by a human who should have been afraid of her. Daniel broke off a piece of his own and took a bite. "See? Nothing scary about it. Just life." Zaira looked at him, the glow in her eyes softening. She did not say it out loud, but in that moment, she felt something she had never known before: trust. Fragile, small, but real. For the first time, the warrior who had destroyed worlds allowed herself to feel human. And Daniel, though he didn't realize it yet, had just given her more than food. He had given her a taste of belonging. Zaira stood with the half-eaten bread in her hand, staring at it as if it were more powerful than any weapon she had ever carried. It wasn't just food, it was proof that there could be another way to live. A way that didn't require blades, blood, and endless orders. But the idea felt dangerous, threatened everything she had been taught. Her armor, once a symbol of her strength, suddenly felt heavy, each piece pressed down on her like chains. She had worn it so long she barely remembered the shape of her body beneath it. To her people, armor wasn't just protection, it was identity. Without it, she was nothing. Daniel noticed the way she shifted uncomfortably. "That armor," he said gently, "doesn't look like it's meant to protect you. It looks like it's meant to trap you." Her head snapped toward him, eyes flashing. "This armor is my life. It has saved me in 1,000 battles. Without it, I would have died long ago." Daniel didn't flinch. He simply nodded. "Maybe, but sometimes what saves us also keeps us from being free." The words struck deep. Zaira wanted to deny them, but her silence betrayed her. She remembered the countless times she had slept in her armor, eaten in it, fought in it. She had never been allowed to remove it in front of others. It was not just metal, it was the cage her people forced her to carry. Daniel stood and walked closer. His voice was calm, steady, like a stream smoothing over rocks. "You don't have to take it off now. But maybe one day you'll see that you don't need it to survive. You're stronger than the armor." Stronger than the armor? The idea seemed impossible. She had always been told the opposite, that without it, she was weak, vulnerable, nothing. But here was a human, unarmed and fragile, daring to tell her she was more than her steel. Her heart pounded. She didn't understand these feelings, this strange warmth in her chest, this desire to believe his words. She was afraid, but not of Daniel. She was afraid of herself. To cover the tremor in her voice, she muttered, "You speak too much, human." Daniel smiled. "And you listen more than you admit." For the first time, her lips twitched. Almost into something like a smile, but it vanished quickly as she forced her warrioress mask back into place. Still, the cracks were there. Tiny, invisible cracks in her armor, both the metal one on her body and the invisible one around her heart. And Daniel could see them. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply stayed by her side, knowing that sometimes silence was the strongest bridge between two souls. That night, Zira realized something terrifying. She didn't fear the humans' words. She feared how much she wanted them to be true. The forest grew quiet as the night deepened. Crickets chirped softly in the distance, and the cool breeze carried the scent of pine. Zaira stood like a shadow among the trees, but inside her chest, something unusual stirred. For years, her heart had been nothing more than a muscle keeping her alive during battles. Now, it felt louder, stronger, as if it wanted her to hear it for the first time. Daniel noticed her hand resting on her chest plate, just above where her heart beat beneath the layers of armor. "You hear it, don't you?" he asked softly. Her eyes narrowed. "Hear what?" "Your own heartbeat," Daniel replied. "It's been there all along, but you never listened to it." Zaira stiffened. On her world, emotions and feelings were seen as weakness. The heartbeat was simply a rhythm to keep a soldier moving, not something to be noticed or cherished. Yet tonight, standing beside this human, she felt it echo like a drum in her ears. Daniel took a step closer. "Your armor may protect your body, but your heart, it's the one thing that proves you're alive. Not the wars you fought, not the battles you won. Just this." He pressed a hand gently against his own chest. The heartbeat. Zara looked at him strangely. No one had ever spoken of such things to her. Her commanders never cared if she lived or died, only if she completed her mission. But this human. He seemed to value something she had never thought of, her life itself. The silence stretched between them until Daniel broke it with a story. "When I was little, I used to think my heartbeat was like a secret drum, reminding me that I mattered, even when the world didn't notice me. Maybe yours is telling you the same thing." His words dug deep into her soul. For so long, Zira believed she was only the shadow blade, the weapon of her people. But now, for the first time, she wondered if there was something more beneath all the armor, something worth saving. Her hand pressed harder against her chest. She could feel it, the steady thump-thump, quiet but strong. It wasn't the sound of a soldier. It was the sound of being alive. Daniel smiled faintly. "You don't have to answer me now. But one day, I hope you'll realize your heart isn't your enemy. It's your guide." Zira turned her gaze away, unwilling to admit the storm inside her. Yet her grip on the flower he had given her tightened. She didn't know why, but holding it while feeling her heartbeat made her feel different. For the first time in her life, Zaya realized she was more than a weapon. She was someone with a heartbeat, and that meant she had the power to choose what kind of life she wanted. The night passed slowly, but Zaira didn't return to her ship. Instead, she stayed in the forest with Daniel, watching the stars scatter across the sky. For the first time, she allowed herself to simply exist. No orders, no commanders, no mission. Just silence, and the strange human beside her. Daniel broke that silence with a question. "Have you ever wondered what life could be like without war?" Zaira's eyes narrowed. The question itself felt foreign. "Without war, there is nothing. My people survive only through battle. Peace makes us weak. War is all we know." Daniel shook his head. "No, war is what you were taught. But it's not all there is." He leaned back, gazing at the stars. "Earth isn't perfect. We've had wars too, many of them. But even after all the fighting, we still build. We still dream, we still love. Because deep down, humans know there's more to life than destruction." Zaira looked at him sharply. The word love again, it haunted her every time he said it. What was this strange force that Daniel kept speaking of? How could something unseen be stronger than war? "You speak like a fool," she muttered, though her voice lacked its usual sharpness. "Your people fight too. Your world bleeds as much as mine." Daniel nodded. "True, but the difference is we fight so that one day we won't have to. That's what makes us keep going. That's what makes life worth it." His words sank into her like seeds pressing into soil. She wanted to deny them, to call them weak, but her mind replayed images of her own world. Endless battles. Children raised to fight. Cities rebuilt only to be destroyed again. Her people never sought peace, they only sought the next enemy. "What happens," she asked slowly, "when there are no more enemies left?" Daniel turned to her, his eyes steady. Then the only battle left is with yourself. To learn who you are when you're not fighting. The thought chilled her. Who was she without war, without armor, without blades, without orders? She had no answer. And that scared her more than any enemy ever had. Daniel noticed her silence and smiled gently. Maybe that's why you're here. Maybe you're not here to destroy Earth. Maybe you're here to discover who Zaira really is. Her heart tightened. No one had ever spoken her name like that before, not as a title, not as a weapon, but as a person. She turned her gaze upward. The stars above no longer looked like battlefields waiting to be conquered. For the first time, they looked beautiful. A small, unspoken thought crept into her mind. Maybe there is a world beyond war. And though she didn't dare admit it aloud, a part of her wanted to see it. The stars burned bright overhead as the night deepened. Zaira stood near the crater, her blade still at her side, but for once, it didn't feel like a part of her. She kept her hand on the flower Daniel had given her, and in its fragile petals, she felt something she couldn't describe. A quiet question lingered inside her, one she had never asked herself before. Daniel noticed the distant look in her glowing eyes. "You're thinking about something," he said gently. Zara's voice was low. "I am thinking." "About who I am?" Daniel leaned forward, curious. "And who do you think you are?" Her silence stretched like a heavy chain. For years, her answer would have been simple. A warrior, a weapon, the shadow blade. But now, the words felt empty. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I do not know." Daniel gave a small smile. "That's not weakness, Zaira. That's the beginning of truth." She tilted her head, confused. "Truth," he said. "Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting others. It's facing yourself. Asking who you really are when no one is giving you orders." The idea unsettled her. On her world, identity was forced on children before they could even speak. You were not allowed to choose. You were molded, trained, shaped into whatever the war demanded. But now, standing on Earth for the first time, Zaira realized she had no answer of her own. Her voice was softer when she asked, "What if I'm nothing without war? What if I'm empty?" Daniel shook his head firmly. "No one is empty. You've just been filled with the wrong things: fear, pain, duty. But underneath all that, there's still you. Just haven't met her yet." Zaira's chest tightened. Meet herself. She had faced countless enemies, fought the strongest warriors in the galaxy. Yet the thought of facing her own identity frightened her more than any battlefield ever had. Daniel picked up a small stone and tossed it into the crater. The ripples in the ash spread outward in circles. "See that?" he said. "Even the smallest thing leaves a mark. You're not nothing, Zaira. You've already left marks on the universe. But maybe now it is time to leave a mark that ice and tea carved in destruction." She stared at him, unsettled by his words. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered inside her, a voice she had never heard before. "What if he is right? What if I can be more than a blade?" The silence grew heavy again. But this time, it wasn't filled with fear. It was filled with possibility. Zaira looked down at her armored hands, then at the flower she still held. Two symbols, one of war and one of life. For the first time, she wondered which one truly belonged to her. And that question, "Who am I, if not a weapon?" would follow her long after the night ended. The night was nearly over, and a pale light began to creep over the horizon. The stars slowly faded, and the first hints of dawn touched the forest with gold. Zaira had never watched a sunrise before. On her homeworld, the sky was often covered in smoke from war machines, and mornings only meant another day of blood. But here on Earth it was different. The light felt soft, alive, almost welcoming. Daniel stretched and looked up at the sky. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked. Zaira tilted her head. "It is. Strange. The light does not burn. It warms." Daniel chuckled. "That's kind of the point. A new day, a new chance." The words made her chest tighten. A new chance. For her, every day had always been the same war. Orders, missions, death. But now, she wondered if a new day really could mean something else. As they stood together in silence, Daniel noticed her expression. Her face, usually cold and hard like carved stone, seemed softer in the light. The glow of her eyes wasn't as sharp. For a brief second, he thought he saw something even more surprising. A flicker of peace. You know, Daniel said carefully, you don't always have to be serious. Life has moments that make you smile, even laugh. Have you ever smiled? Zaira's eyes narrowed, smiled. The word sounded foreign to her, as if it belonged to another language. Daniel nodded. Yeah, like this. He curved his lips into a warm, natural smile. It's a way humans show happiness, or sometimes even hope. She stared at him, confused. Why expose your teeth as a sign of peace? That is a predator's gesture on my world. Daniel laughed lightly. Maybe, but here, it's different. It's how we remind each other that we're alive, and that life isn't all pain. Zaira frowned, trying to imitate him. Her lips twitched awkwardly, pulling up into a stiff line that looked more like a grimace than a smile. Daniel burst into laughter. Not bad. Little scary, but hey, it's a start. She glared at him, but something unexpected happened. The sound of his laughter, genuine and warm, stirred something inside her. It was strange, but not unpleasant. Without realizing it, her lips curved again, this time more naturally. Her sharp, glowing eyes softened. For the first time in her life, Zaira smiled. Daniel froze, stunned. There it is. Your first real smile. Zaira blinked, surprised at herself. This feels strange, but lighter. That's because a smile is freedom, Daniel said softly. Even if just for a moment, it means the war inside you is quiet. Her chest warmed at his words. She didn't understand why such a small act made her feel different, but it did. For a brief moment, the alien warrior was not the Shadow Blade. She was simply Zaira, standing in the sunrise, learning how to smile. And though it was small, that smile was the first crack of light breaking through years of darkness. The morning sun rose higher, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. For Zaira, the light felt new, almost unnatural, yet comforting in a way she couldn't explain. She had survived countless battles and seen entire worlds burn, but never had she simply stood and watched the day begin. Daniel noticed her silence and decided to teach her something else about being human. Do you know what care means? He asked gently. Zaira tilted her head, her armor clinking softly. Care, another human word? Yes, Daniel replied. What we show to people when they matter to us. It means looking after someone, not because we're ordered to, but because we choose to. Zaira frowned. On my world, no one chooses such things. Soldiers care only for victory. To care for another is to weaken yourself. Daniel shook his head. That's where you're wrong. Caring doesn't weaken you, it makes you stronger. When we care, we fight harder. Not because we're told to, but because someone's happiness, someone's life, means something to us. The words unsettled her. She had been taught all her life that caring was a flaw, a dangerous distraction. Yet as Daniel spoke, his tone carried a weight she couldn't ignore. Why tell me this? She asked, her voice low. Daniel smiled. Because I already care, Zaira. I care that you're more than what they made you. I care that you deserve better. Her chest tightened again. The same strange ache she had felt when he gave her the flower. Deserve, that word kept haunting her. Could it be true? Could she, a weapon of war, deserve something as fragile and human as care? Daniel stepped closer, picking up a small branch from the ground. He broke it into two and handed her one half. See this? It's nothing strong. Alone. It breaks easily. He snapped his piece in half to prove his point. But if two branches lean on each other, they're harder to break. He placed her branch against his and pressed. Together, they didn't snap. That's what care is, Daniel explained. It means you don't have to stand alone all the time. It means someone is willing to stand beside you. Zaira stared at the two branches. Her mind flashed with memories of battles fought alone, victories claimed in silence, wounds endured without comfort. She had never leaned on anyone. She had never been allowed to. But now, a human had placed a broken branch in her hand and told her she didn't have to carry everything alone. Something inside her shifted. Slowly, she whispered, If what you say is true, then I do not know how to care. Daniel gave her a reassuring smile. That's okay. You don't have to know everything right away. I can teach you. Her grip on the branch tightened. For the first time, Zaira wondered if maybe learning the language of care was the greatest battle she would ever face. The day grew brighter, and sunlight spilled through the trees. For Daniel, the forest was peaceful. But for Zaira, peace felt like an enemy she couldn't trust. Silence made her remember things she had long buried, memories she wished would stay hidden. Daniel noticed the way her eyes darkened, as if she were somewhere far away. "You're remembering something, aren't you?" he asked quietly. Her jaw tightened. Memories are weapons. They sharpen us. They remind us why we fight. Daniel shook his head. Not always. Sometimes memories are scars. And scars don't just show where we've been hurt. They show that we survived. The word scar made her chest ache. Slowly, she lifted her armored hand to the side of her neck, where a faint mark ran across her skin. It was the only place her armor hadn't fully protected her in battle. She had always thought of it as proof of weakness. But now, Daniel's words made her see it differently. "I have many scars," she admitted, her voice trembling for the first time. "Each one is a failure. Each one is shame." Daniel stepped closer, his tone firm but gentle. "No, Zaira. Each one is a story. Every scar means you lived through something that should have destroyed you. That's not weakness. It's strength." Her glowing eyes softened as she studied him. He spoke with such certainty, such belief, that it unsettled her. "On my world, scars make you unworthy. Only perfection is honored. Imperfection is discarded." Daniel's eyes filled with sadness. "Then your world never understood what real strength is. Perfection is empty. Scars show life. They show that you're real." The words echoed inside her. Real. She had never thought of herself that way. To her commanders, she was only a weapon, an extension of their power. But Daniel was telling her that her scars didn't make her less, they made her her. Slowly, almost against her own will, she removed one piece of her armor, the gauntlet on her right arm. Beneath it, her skin was rough, marked by burns and cuts from past battles. She held it out as if daring him to recoil. "Do you still see a warrior?" she asked bitterly. Daniel didn't flinch. Instead, he reached out gently and touched the edge of one scar. "I see someone who survived. I see someone strong enough to carry pain and still stand." Her throat tightened. No one had ever touched her scars without disgust or judgment. No one had ever dared to call them proof of strength. For the first time, the shame she had carried for years began to loosen its grip. A long silence hung between them. Then Daniel said softly, "Your scars don't define you, Zaira. They remind you that you're more than a blade. You're alive. And that means you can heal." Zaira closed her eyes, clutching the flower tighter in her other hand. For the first time in her existence, she allowed herself to believe she might not be broken after all. The forest grew warmer as the sun climbed higher. Birds began to sing, their voices weaving through the branches like threads of light. Daniel breathed in deeply, enjoying the calm of the morning. Zaira, however, shifted uncomfortably. Calm felt unnatural to her. On her world, rest was seen as weakness, and sleep was only a tool to regain strength for the next battle. Daniel noticed the way her eyes kept scanning the trees, her body always tense. "You don't know how to rest, do you?" he asked gently. Zaira frowned. "Rest is for the weak. A warrior must always be ready." Daniel shook his head. "That's not true. Even warriors need rest." "Rest doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It's what gives you strength to keep going." The words confused her. Rest had never been allowed in her training. Children were forced to march until they collapsed. Sleep came only when exhaustion defeated them. Even then, they were never safe, never free from the threat of attack. Rest was a luxury she had never been taught to value. "On my world," she said slowly, "those who rest too long are left behind. They die." Daniel's expression softened. "Then your world stole something from you. Rest isn't just about sleep. It's about peace. It's about letting yourself feel safe, even for a moment." She looked at him sharply. "Safe? There is no such thing." Daniel gave a small smile. "There is. Right here. Right now." He sat down on the soft grass, leaning back against a tree. "Close your eyes just for a moment. Listen to the birds. Feel the sun on your face. That's rest." Closing her eyes meant lowering her guard, meant vulnerability. But something in Daniel's calmness, the way he leaned so casually against the tree, made her curious. Slowly, she sat down beside him, though her body remained stiff. She closed her eyes just for a second, expecting danger. But instead, she felt warmth. The sun touched her skin through the gaps in her armor, and the sound of birds filled the silence she usually drowned in battle cries. Her chest rose and fell slowly. For once, she wasn't holding her blade, wasn't preparing to strike. She was simply breathing. This, she whispered, almost afraid of the word, feels different. Daniel smiled without opening his eyes. That's rest, which your heart has been waiting for. She opened her eyes, looking at him. Why do you keep teaching me these things? Daniel met her gaze. Because someone has to. Because you deserve to know there's more to life than war. For the first time, Zaire leaned back slightly against the tree. It was awkward, unnatural, but strangely comforting. A small piece of her armor felt lighter, as if she no longer needed it as much. And in that quiet moment, as the forest sang and the sunlight warmed her face, the alien warrior, who had never known peace, finally tasted rest. The day grew brighter, and the forest filled with the sound of life. Birds darted through the branches, squirrels scurried across the ground, and the wind carried whispers through the trees. Daniel picked up a stick and began tracing shapes in the dirt. Zara watched him curiously, her glowing eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Telling a story," Daniel replied with a smile. He drew a small circle and then a larger one around it. Stories are how humans share their lives. They connect us, remind us that we're not alone. Zaira tilted her head. "On my world, there are no stories. It's only records of battles, lists of victories, and names of the dead." Daniel's face softened. "Then your people forgot something important. Stories aren't just about war, they're about hope. They're about dreams, lessons, and the things we hold in our hearts." Zaira stared at the circles he had drawn. "What story are you telling now?" He smiled. "This small circle is you. This big one is the universe, and the space in between. It's your journey. Every step you take is part of your story. You're not just a blade, Zaira. You're a story waiting to be told." Her chest tightened. A story? She had never thought of herself that way. To her commanders, she was nothing more than a weapon to be written into battle records. But the way Daniel spoke, he made her feel like she was more than just a name on a list. Daniel leaned closer. "Do you want to hear one of my stories?" She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "When I was little," Daniel began, "I used to think I was invisible. People overlooked me because I wasn't the strongest, the smartest, or the loudest. But my grandmother told me something I never forgot. She said, 'Daniel, every person is a storybook. Some pages are dark, some are bright, but all of them matter.'" He smiled faintly. Her words helped me see myself differently, not as invisible, but as a story still being written. Zaira studied him carefully. His voice carried something she had never heard before: tenderness. His story wasn't about conquest or blood, it was about love, loss, and hope. It was about the invisible strength that came from believing you mattered. For the first time, Zaira wondered if she, too, was a story worth telling.
Ow.
Daniel looked at her directly.
You've been told your whole life that you're just a warrior.
But I see more. I see someone who has scars, yes, but also someone who can learn, grow, and change. Your story isn't over, Zara. It's only beginning." Her throat tightened as she gripped the flower still in her hand. She didn't know what to say, but deep inside, she felt something new. The desire to believe that she wasn't just a shadow, not just a weapon. She was a story, one that might one day be told with light instead of blood. The forest air grew warmer as the sun climbed higher, but inside Zara, a storm brewed. Daniel's words lingered in her mind like echoes she couldn't silence. "You're not just a weapon, you're a story. You can change." Change. The very word filled her with fear. On her world, change was punished. Soldiers who questioned their purpose disappeared. Warriors who hesitated in battle were erased from memory. Change was weakness, and weakness was death. Yet here she was, sitting beside a human who spoke of change as if it were a gift. She clenched her fists, her claws scraping against the dirt. "You speak as if change is simple," she growled. But it is not. I was forged to fight. If I stop, then what am I? Daniel looked at her calmly. That's the question, isn't it? Who are you when you're not fighting? You've been told your whole life that you're only a blade, but you've already proved that's not true. Her eyes narrowed. How? Daniel gestured toward the flower she still held.
Ow.
You could have crushed that flower the moment I gave it to you, but you didn't. You could have killed me when we first met, but you didn't. Every choice you've made since then has been different from what they trained you to do. That's change, Zara. Whether you admit it or not, it's already happening. His words unsettled her deeply. She hated how true they sounded. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the flower in her hand proved otherwise. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was heavy with the truth she was afraid to face. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "Change feels like betrayal. Betrayal of my people. Betrayal of my mission. Betrayal of everything I was meant to be." Daniel's expression softened. No, change isn't betrayal, it's growth. You not turning your back on who you were, you rediscovering who you really are. She shook her head, frustration in her eyes. And what if who I really am is nothing? Daniel leaned closer, his voice steady. Then you get to decide. That's the power of being alive. You don't have to accept the story someone else wrote for you. You can write your own. Her heart pounded hard in her chest. His words made her feel both terrified and hopeful. Could she really rewrite her life? Could she be more than the Shadow Blade? The thought was overwhelming. She stood abruptly, her armor clinking as she moved. You do not understand, human. Change is dangerous. Destroys everything. Daniel looked up at her, his eyes calm but firm. Or maybe it saves everything. The silence between them was sharp as a blade. Deep inside, Zara knew something had already shifted. The fear of change was real, but so was the possibility that it could set her free. Zaira paced slowly through the forest clearing, her boots pressing into the dirt with heavy thuds. Her glowing eyes flickered with unease. She had faced countless enemies, warriors, beasts, even armies, but none had shaken her the way Daniel's words did. He wasn't her enemy, yet somehow he had unlocked one she had never faced before. Herself. Inside her, two voices battled. One was the voice of her commanders, sharp and merciless. You are a weapon. You were forged for war. Love is weakness. Care is betrayal. That voice was cold, familiar, and powerful. But another voice new, quiet and uncertain, whispered something different. You are alive. You are more than armor. You are a story still unfolding. That voice sounded like Daniel. It was soft, but it refused to vanish. Zaira clutched her head, frustration burning in her chest. Why? Why do I feel this way? She muttered. I was never meant to question. Was never meant to doubt. Daniel, sitting calmly on a fallen log, watched her carefully. He didn't interrupt. He knew this battle wasn't his to fight. It was hers. Finally, she turned toward him, her voice rough. You have placed a war inside me. I do not know which side will win. Daniel met her gaze. It's not about sides, Zaira. It's about choice. For the first time, you're not being forced, you're deciding. That's what makes this battle harder than any war you've ever fought. Her hands trembled slightly. Choice, she had never been given one before. Even as a child, her fate was written in blood and iron. Now the weight of freedom pressed down on her like a mountain. I'm afraid, she whispered, her voice almost breaking. Daniel stood slowly and walked closer. Good. Fear means you care about the outcome. It means what you're choosing matters. Zara looked at him sharply. On my world, fear is forbidden. To fear is to fail. Daniel shook his head. On Earth, fear doesn't mean failure. Fear means you're alive. Sometimes facing fear is what makes you strong. Her chest tightened again, and she realized something frightening. Words were starting to make more sense than the ones she had carried her whole life. The enemy within, her, the doubt, the questions, the emotions, was no longer something to crush. It was something to understand, but understanding came with pain. Memories of her commander's voices haunted her, pulling her back toward the shadows. Yet Daniel's voice, gentle and steady, pulled her toward the light. For the first time, Zira realized that the greatest battle she would ever fight was not against humans. not against her enemies, but against the chains inside her heart. She looked at Daniel, her voice low but firm. If I choose a new path, I will not know who I am. Daniel smiled softly. And that's the adventure, Zaira, to find out. Her heart pounded, as if preparing for a new kind of warren, one of blood and fire, but one of truth and self-discovery. The forest was alive with the sounds of morning. Leaves rustled in the breeze, birds sang from high branches, and sunlight spilled across the clearing like liquid gold. But Zaira hardly noticed. Inside, she was still caught in a storm. The battle within her was louder than any sound around her. Daniel bent down and picked up a smooth stone from the ground. He held it out to her. "Take a look," he said. Zaira frowned. "At a rock, not just a rock," Daniel replied. He rubbed it against his sleeve until the surface shone faintly. Then he handed it to her. A mirror curious, she took it and tilted it toward her face. Her glowing blue eyes stared back at her, sharp and unyielding. Her skin bore marks of war, and her armor reflected the image of a warrior forged in battle. But beneath all that, she noticed something she had never truly seen before: vulnerability. "This is who I am," she muttered bitterly. "A weapon, a destroyer." Daniel shook his head. "No, that's who they told you to be. But look closer. Do you see what I see?" She glared at him. "What do you see, human?" "I see someone who's tired," Daniel said softly. "I see someone who has carried pain for too long. I see someone who wants more than war, even if she's too afraid to admit it." Her chest tightened. She turned the stone away, unable to keep looking at herself. "You imagine things? You see what is not there." Daniel stepped closer. "Maybe. Or maybe you've never had anyone hold up a mirror and tell you the truth. You're not just what they made you. You're what you choose to become." Zaira's fingers trembled around the stone. The reflection had unsettled her. Not because it showed a warrior, because it showed something deeper, someone she didn't recognize, someone she wasn't sure she wanted to ignore anymore. She lowered the stone and whispered, "What if I fail? What if I cannot change?" Daniel's voice was steady. "Then you try again. That's the human way. We fall, we break, but we stand up. That's what makes us strong, not perfection. It's not endless victories. It's just the courage to keep going." For a long moment, Zaira said nothing. But deep inside, something shifted. She realized that perhaps humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its armies or machines. It was its heart, the ability to see beyond scars, to dream beyond battles, to rise again after every fall. Slowly, she looked back at Daniel. "Perhaps, I wish to see what you see." He smiled warmly. "Then let me show you. One step at a time." Zaira held the stone close, as if it were more than just a mirror. It was a symbol of a choice she hadn't made yet, but wanted to. For the first time, the alien warrior began to wonder if she could learn not just to fight, but to live. As the morning stretched on, the forest grew brighter. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, scattering golden patterns on the ground. Zaira stood in the middle of the clearing, the stone still in her hand. Her reflection haunted her, not because it showed a warrior, thought, but because it showed something else, something she had never dared to face before. Daniel watched her quietly, sensing the storm in her silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but sharp. "I feel something inside me. A fire. It burns, but I cannot tell if it is strength or weakness." Daniel tilted his head. "Describe it." Her glowing eyes flickered. "It is not like rage. Rage is a weapon, sharp and easy to control. This fire feels alive. It frightens me because I do not understand it." Daniel smiled faintly. "That fire isn't rage, it's hope. It's the beginning of who you really are." She stiffened. "Hope, that word means nothing to me. Hope is for the weak." Daniel shook his head. "No, hope is what makes us strong. Hope is the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. It's what keeps humans moving, even when everything around us is broken." Zaira clenched her fists, struggling against the strange heat in her chest. "But what if hope fails? What if tomorrow is worse? Then we keep hoping anyway," Daniel said firmly. "Because the fire inside us doesn't die unless we let it. That's what makes it powerful." His words sank deep into her, like seeds falling into soil that had never known growth. She thought back to the countless battles she had fought. Her people survived through fear, through dominance, through endless war. But what if hope was stronger than all of that? Her voice trembled. If I let this fire grow, will it destroy me? Daniel stepped closer, his eyes steady. No, it will rebuild you. You've been burned down to nothing but steel and scars. Hope is the fire that can forge you into something new, not a weapon, but a person. Her chest tightened. She remembered the flower he had given her, fragile yet alive. She remembered the bread they had shared, warm and comforting. Remembered her first awkward smile at sunrise. All those moments had fed the fire inside her. For the first time, she didn't try to smother it. She let it burn. And in that burning, she felt something she had never known before: freedom. Her eyes softened as she whispered, "If this fire is truly hope, then perhaps I want to carry it." Daniel smiled warmly. "Then carry it, Zara. Let it guide you, so that fire will show you who you really are." She looked down at her armored hands. For years, they had only known destruction. But now, for the first time, she wondered if they could learn to build, to protect, to heal. The fire within her was no longer her enemy. It was her chance to finally be alive. The day had fully bloomed and the forest shimmered with life. Sunlight poured through the leaves, painting the clearing in soft gold. For Zara, the world felt different than it had the night before. The forest wasn't just a battlefield waiting to happen. It was alive, breathing, and somehow, so was she. Daniel stood beside her, quiet, allowing her to feel the moment without interruption. He had given her the gift of silence many times before, but now that silence was no longer heavy with confusion. It was light, filled with possibility. Finally, Zara spoke, her voice steady yet softer than ever. "I was trained to believe I was nothing without my armor, my blade, my battles. But here, I feel something else. I feel as if I am more." Daniel smiled. "You are more. You always were. You just needed someone to remind you." Her glowing eyes met his, and for the first time she didn't see judgment or fear reflected there. She saw belief in her, not as a warrior, but as a being who deserved life, kindness, and peace. Her hand brushed against the flower still tucked carefully in her palm. She had protected it all night, even though it was fragile. She realized something. She had treated the flower more gently than she had ever treated herself. And in that moment, the truth struck her. "I have fought so many battles," she whispered. "I never fought for myself, never believed I was worth saving." Daniel placed a hand over his chest. "That's the hardest battle of all, the battle to love yourself. But Zara, you've already begun to win it. You've chosen hope. You've chosen trust. And now, it's time to choose you." Her throat tightened, but not from pain, from release. She slowly removed one more piece of her armor, letting it fall to the ground with a dull thud, then another. The weight that had caged her for years began to lift. She stood not as the Shadow Blade, but as Zara Bear, scarred but real. For the first time in her existence, she felt free. She lifted her head toward the sky, letting the sunlight touch her skin. It was warm, soft, unlike the cold steel that had defined her life. And in that moment she whispered the words she had never dared to say. "I am more than a weapon. I am alive. I am worthy." Daniel's smile widened, his eyes shining with quiet pride. "Yes, sire, you are." The forest around them seemed to echo her declaration. The birds sang louder, the wind danced through the trees, and the fire within her burned brighter, no longer as rage, but as love for life. For the world around her, and finally, love for herself. The alien warrior who once believed she was nothing but a blade had found something greater. She had found her heart, and in learning to love herself, she had won the only battle that truly mattered.